that have cabotage-type laws. This, from at least my knowledge of what the Russian proposal is, sounds like a cabotage-type law, which, for all the various same reasons why we want to have a Jones Act and think a Jones Act is important.
Now, the United States is now an exporter of LNG and oil. Should we not, would it be in the American interest in creating cargo to have some percentage of that export of LNG and oil be on American flagged and American built ships? Would that create a cargo opportunity for the American maritime industry?
Yes, sir. I think it would. You know, cargo is king, as we have said, and as you have all pointed out. What generates cargo generates ships and therefore generates jobs. So, you know, where we can generate cargo in international trade, that would be ultimately likely to the benefit of our industry.
And that now brings me to the issue of cargo preference enforcement, which is a MARAD program, to some extent also the Coast Guard. The 2008 NDAA directed MARAD to promulgate regulations to strengthen its enforcement of cargo preference requirements. Since then, MARAD has been unable to clear a proposal through the OMB office. Admiral Busby.
Sir.
You're new at this. Are you going to give it another shot? And are you capable of overcoming OMB with our help?
That's a good question, sir, which we'll have to kind of see how that plays out.
Let the last question go, but the first question, are you ready to proceed?
Sure. The first part, sir, my cargo preference office actually is very heavily engaged on both sides, both with shippers and with the government agencies that ship cargo preference cargo. And we are working with them actually pretty well to ensure that currently the 50% cargo preference requirement is being met. And where it's not specifically being met for a particular cargo, we are doing what I would call catch-up procedures, where if it's through the non-availability of a U.S. flag ship to carry a particular cargo, we can make an exception to allow that cargo to go on a foreign flag ship. However, another cargo that's being shipped by that agency that maybe not required to be cargo preference, that gets made to be cargo preference, so it catches up and fulfills the requirement.
Well, the cargo preference laws are more than just food aid. They're also material goods that have been financed by the federal government. So it's a very broad array of things.
Yes, sir.
The more active and the more aggressive you are in investigating, quantifying, and reporting on these cargo opportunities and missed opportunities, the more likely it is that we will develop the cargo. If you're not willing to do that, and if you're not active, and I hope you would be very, very aggressive at this, it will move us towards more cargo rather than less. So we will, I hope, and certainly I think the chairman would agree with this, we'll hold you accountable for your efforts and for your activity in investigating, quantifying, and fully developing the information about all cargo that is impelled on American ships. You ready for that?
Absolutely, sir.
Good. I want to go to the issue of the Outer Continental Shelf. Admiral Nadeau, I want to talk to you about your B-1 visas. This is going to be a subject from the second panel, but since you won't be around after the second panel or for it, let's get into it. The Coast Guard issues B-1 visas for foreign mariners to operate on either American or foreign ships providing services in the Outer Continental Shelf. How many visas have you issued?
Sir, I think that the Coast Guard issues a letter of non-availability to the vessels. We don't actually issue the visas. So we do issue letters of non-availability to foreign flag vessels that are majority foreign owned under the Outer Continental Shelf Lands Act, OXLA. There are provisions in
The
there. where they
visas
can be-
start with your letter, don't they?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
Okay, then how many letters?
I would have to take that back to get you exact numbers. I wouldn't want to make an estimate here. We deal with those routinely. They come in, they're evaluated, we issue them, and then if there's a change in ownership or change in operations, those operators are supposed to come back to us to have them reevaluated. But I
When
take
can you
that-
get the information for me?
I would hope we have good records, sir, but it'd be as soon as
This
possible.
afternoon?
I'll do my best.
Good. You're aware that about half of the vessels that provide services to the Outer Continental Shelf or the and inner shelf are laid up?
Yes, sir, that's correct. We met with OMSA last week, and they
And-
provided us an update.
Do you have information on the number of foreign of ships that are that have foreign mariners rather than American mariners of those? So if half of the fleet is laid up, why? Is it foreign competition?
At this time, sir, my understanding is it's more because there's not as much activity in the Gulf of Mexico.
Okay.
So if we're talking strictly a Gulf of Mexico, my understanding is that at the U.S. fleet, a lot of those vessels are tied up, but I wouldn't have any statistics for the global fleet.
I noticed my colleague down the dais here wants to jump in on this. So I guess you're going to be next. And I would appreciate you jumping in and carrying on this discussion. It's a big issue because it not only affects the mariners, but it affects the entire entire workforce and the ships. And I think part of the problem is created by the Coast Guard with your letters. We want to get into this in detail. When you issue a letter, do you also investigate whether the individual that is working on these ships is qualified?
Sir, again, we issue a letter to the vessel, and then that allows them to go out and find qualified people that meet whatever standards you're trying to fulfill. So there's
Do you then investigate whether the jobs that are being made available are filled by qualified foreign nationals?
foreign flag vessels are subject to the manning as specified by the flag that they fly. Just like U.S. vessels, we determine the manning. To the state, we have to make sure they meet SCCW, but for a lot of jobs in question, they're back deck where they have specialized skill sets.
So we may have foreign mariners operating in the outer continental shelf and the inner that may or may not be qualified under U.S. law. Is that the case?
So I'd say U.S. law provides us to issue those exemptions, which we issue to the vessel. Then it is Department of State that issues the visa to the
Understood.
actual crew member, and then CBP handles the entry process as they come into the
But my
state.
question goes to the qualifications of the mariner. Now, if they're American ships and American mariners, they have to meet a certain qualification, correct?
That's correct, sir.
Do these foreign nationals operating within the, providing these services,
They
do
would
they meet the same qualifications?
probably SCCW, the International Convention.
They do.
Yes, sir, for a foreign
Who's
ship,
responsible for checking whether they do or do not?
the foreign flag, if they're a foreign flag ship, that nation sets the manning and handles the licensing for those.
So you don't know whether they are qualified or not?
As part of our routine port state control boardings, we do go on board and we check the license certificates and documentation of all members on board the
We'll
ship.
go into this in more detail. Unfortunately, you will not be here after we hear from other witnesses. I yield back.
Thank the gentleman. Mr. Graves is recognized.
Thank you, Admirals. Appreciate you being here today. And I want to start on the line of Mr. Garamendi's line of questioning, which I think is excellent. Admiral Nadeau, excuse me, Do you know how many countries you've issued letters to under the waiver program under the B-1?
So I think we issue them to the vessel.
Right.
So how many?
I'm sorry,
different
yeah,
flags?
the flag of those nations.
Off the top of my head, I do not, sir. We'll have to try and get
Do
that.
you know if there are any vessels that are flagged from nations that would be considered perhaps unfriendly to the United States that are operating in the OCS?
Unfriendly, like North Korea or Venezuela?
Take your pick.
I really doubt that, but I can provide those numbers for you. I'll do my best to get those